What's up, Convoy? Uploading a video 3 days in a row now, which I haven't done in a very long time on this channel. Today's video is going to be about a question that I get asked a lot, and that's if I miss trucking. And it wasn't until recently that I really didn't have a solid answer, because certain aspects, yes. A lot of aspects, no, I don't. Do I miss it? And the yes aspects was, yeah, you definitely had some really good days in trucking. You know, you'd pick up a load, especially if it was like a preloaded trailer, you just drop and hook, and it'd be a nice long run where you'd make a ton of money and you didn't run into any problems. And that seemed to happen more at the beginning of my career, especially when everything was brand new to me. It was incredible going to new places I've never been before. For instance, I remember my first load into Texas. Now, for those of you who don't know me or just watching me for the first time, I live in just outside of Detroit, Michigan. Been here my whole life. Really haven't been to too many places before I started truck driving. And I remember my first load into Texas. I was so excited to go. I even remember it was a city called Mesquite, Texas, and I remember thinking, yeah, that definitely sounds like a city that belongs in Texas. And I went there. I don't even remember the kind of freight that I had. I delivered there, and if I remember correctly, it was nothing like I had pictured it in my head. It was just a suburb outside of Dallas. But it was cool. That was my first time in Texas, and I was super pumped to do that load. And I was in Texas. As compared to the end of my driving days, I would just get super angry if I knew I had to go back into Texas, because I had figured things out. I knew how the freight lanes worked a little bit, and I knew I would be stuck in that region for a while. Especially, I'd get super angry if it was getting close to my home time, where I was supposed to be back in Michigan, and they tried sending me to Texas, because I knew I probably was not going to get home on time if they sent me to Texas. But the good days, let's talk about that. Even towards the end of my career, there were some good days where everything would go right, which for those of you that drive now, there's not a whole lot of loads where everything goes right. It might be something like there's a drop and hook on your pickup. It's a nice long run that makes you a lot of money, and you just drop and hook on the other end, and you have a pre-plan that's close, and you keep moving. Those kind of runs are few, far, and in between. Usually it's something like days where you feel like you spin your wheels all day and you get nothing accomplished. You pick up a load maybe in one of the big cities, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Los Angeles, Miami, wherever, big city. And it's most likely a place that's kind of a pain to get into. You go pick up your load. Could be a smaller place, could be a wait to pick up your load, whatever the case may be that frustrates you. But you get your load. You feel happy, you get out of there. You battle traffic for a while, and you start losing time. A lot of times, you get a load that doesn't have a very big window, which means you can't stop too much. You don't have a lot of time for rest. You don't have a lot of time for anything except to drive and get the load to its destination. You might even be driving. Now I pulled... For most of my over-the-road career, I pulled a reefer trailer, which is a refrigerated trailer. Most of the stuff I hauled was food. But pulling a reefer trailer, you could pull anything that needs to be temperature controlled. I used to haul a lot of needles when I worked for Warner, like syringes for hospitals and stuff. But there were a lot of days where you would pick up a load, you'd fight traffic. There wouldn't be very much, if any, window. and you drive hard for 6, 7, 8 hours, and you'd be coming up on a truck stop. You know you're late. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you drive 6, 7, 8 hours straight, you would come up on that truck stop. You'd pull in there. You'd get out. You'd use the bathroom. And especially me pulling a reefer. A lot of you guys that move reefers know that a lot of stuff moves through the night, which your schedule's backwards, which is okay. But you know, you'd get out at that truck stop. You'd walk in. You walk past a driver, another driver who'd be in there, and you'd walk by him, and you could smell him because he, by his choice or not, probably hadn't showered in a while, and he doesn't even acknowledge that you exist. You walk up to the cooler, get your drink or whatever you need, and then you'd walk up to the cash register to where you'd find a cashier who is playing on their phone and don't acknowledge you exist for a few minutes. And then once they do acknowledge your existence, they act like you're some kind of inconvenience in their day. You'd pay for your stuff. You'd walk back out to your truck. Sometimes to where you would have 4 or 5 missed phone calls from your dispatcher because you know you're late. You know you're not going to get that load there on time because of bad planning. And you'd have a message or two on your ELD from your dispatcher asking why you even stopped in the first place. And you'd start driving again. You'd get to your destination. At least for me, a lot of times it was a grocery warehouse pulling a reefer trailer. And if it was, say, something like a Meijer or a Walmart distribution center, they didn't care if you were 1 minute or 5 hours late. And it wasn't arriving in your truck to the facility. It was, you would have to arrive with your truck, get checked in at the guard check, which sometimes could take an hour or more by itself because of all the other trucks in front of you. Then you'd have to get staged, backed in, parked, walk into the receiving office, and wait there somewhere, sometimes over an hour because of all the other drivers in front of you. And by the time you hand your paperwork in to whoever's working there, they stamp your paperwork late, and you're automatically kind of moved to a category of we'll get to you whenever we can, if we even get to you. There's been instances where I've been in that scenario, and they say, we're not going to accept this today. Call your company, reschedule. But if they do accept you, you may only have an hour or two on your ELD, which is your electronic logging device, which monitors your hours of service. And they might take 4 or 5 hours to get you unloaded. And at this point, you can't drive. You're on a 10-hour break now, or you're going to go into violation. And if you're caught by DOT, you can be shut down right there. You can be fined, whatever. You can get in trouble with your company if you're caught driving. Whatever the case, you're not supposed to drive for 8 hours. And so they get you unloaded. You don't have any hours to drive. And then this place demands that you get off their property now. None of this in the beginning was your fault. A lot of stuff like that happened, and then you would get, aside from that issue, which happens quite a bit, especially with ELDs now, which technically doesn't really, it's not supposed to matter, ELDs or paper logs, because if you're following your hours of service to a T, it really shouldn't matter. But with paper logs, you can go back and edit and make it look like you have hours of drive. But aside from that issue, the general motoring public out there doesn't really respect truck drivers. I wouldn't say don't respect them, but they have no patience with truck drivers, I'm guilty of it myself now. I get on the freeway and there's some truck traffic in front of me. You know, I don't care. I'll do 100 miles an hour to get by them. Just I don't want to put up with it. I get on by, and that's always what has happened with people driving cars to people driving trucks. Now I know better than to mess around with them. You know, I'm not going to cut them off or weave in and out of truck traffic or whatever. But you know, I definitely get away from trucks now. But there's a lot of people who just don't care. You know, if they're driving down the highway, you see it all the time as a truck driver. You'd look down, someone almost hit you because they're coming into your lane next to your trailer. Then they start getting by you, and you look down, and they're you know, face first into their cell phone. It happens all the time. But sadly enough, way too much did I see it with other truck drivers too. They'd be on their phone, driving down the road, 18-wheeler, fully loaded, you know, 70, 80,000 pounds, just not even looking at the road. So if you're a truck driver out there, don't act like that doesn't happen either. But aside from the traffic, the motoring public out there, other truck drivers themselves, they don't respect you. You know, for those of you, most people watching this, obviously you're on YouTube, you'd probably be on other forms of social media, you know, especially Facebook. That's what I'm heavily involved with. Go to these trucking pages and just look at how truck drivers treat each other. And if you're a truck driver, you probably know that about Facebook and those groups like, you know, Truckers Wall of Shame and Twisted Truckers and stuff. There's not a whole lot of respect between drivers. And if you're a driver and you have a CB, go to any truck stop and turn your CB on. That's just a foul mess. Nobody was just really respectful on there. And last but definitely not least, your own company. I mean, you know, your dispatcher would ask you why you stopped after driving real hard and dealing with traffic in a big city and whatever. Those of you that saw The Ugly Truth of Trucking got to see that firsthand. They don't care about you. You know, you almost feel like, you know, you really are just a number. Even less than that, you feel like a head of cattle. So, do I miss trucking? It's a mixed bag. Mostly no. Absolutely not. But sometimes, yeah. And those really good loads, you know, especially when I'd be cruising through the Southwest, which was my favorite part of the country, on a good day with a nice big load that was paying money. Yeah, I miss that. But the vast majority of driving, don't miss it at all. Now, I'm glad I went through it. You know, I really feel like I had to go through that to be where I'm at now, which I'm very thankful for. And I know for sure that if I'm ever in a pinch and somehow I can't make any income, I know I could always turn back to trucking to at least support myself. So that would be my answer to if I miss trucking. Yeah, it's a little bit heavier of a topic than I've talked about in the last couple of videos, but I think it's important to get my view out there at least, because I know a lot of drivers that have stopped driving and still do drive today feel the same way. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you've made it to this part of the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Run hard and get paid.